Ever wonder what really goes on in the world of offshore oil rigs, wind farms, and the energy industry that powers your life? Find the answers to those questions and more on the podcast Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe. Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe pulls back the curtain and shares the raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines of energy. From offshore drilling disasters to wind turbine advancements, Joe brings on people who've lived it, worked it, and have the scars or the laughs to prove it. When you tune into Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe, you'll hear jaw-dropping experiences like being 100 meters underwater with no air, to real conversations about safety, environmental impact, and the politics that don't make it into the brochures. It's insight, storytelling, and sometimes controversy, and always honest. If you're an energy insider or just someone curious about the wild world that keeps the lights on, Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe is the podcast for you. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Real people, real stories, no filter. Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe. Start listening right now.
Actually, I started with Stromager in 92.
Okay.
So I was a wireline and testing engineer. And so I was in bigger international rota. And then after that, so just because I was everywhere and traveling, accumulating quite considerable number of jobs, then I gained their GFE. And then I did some cross training with Dowell Stromager in that time. And so doing fracking, cold tubing, sand control. So, but I was with them just 5 years, so
right,
I knew
okay.
it was going to be just
Their training program.
So
Their training program is incredible, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I had a. Oh, it's really good.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very grateful I had that. Starting, and even more being on their international rota, because then you get to see it's not just the type of jobs, because you are all the time truly working 24/7. But also in different places, so onshore, offshore, barges, deeper water platforms. So you just get to see the full spectrum in a very relatively short period of time. So it was, as an exposure.
And obviously,
I couldn't have got it better.
being part of Stromager, you've probably worked in some interesting places, shall we say. How is that as a woman working in them, especially considering it's probably male dominated?
In that time it was very much male dominated. A lot more. So we're talking about 92. So the first, my, let's say, introduction to the male dominated industry was going offshore in Gulf of Mexico and being put into the hotbed system.
Oh, no.
And open showers. So, that was, yes, and I was, 18 years old. So you could imagine that one, never going out. It was my first time leaving my country or traveling abroad. So, and I come from a very rural place. So you could imagine how much of a shock system
I can't actually, to be honest. It's bad enough open showers when you're a man in 4 or 6 man cabins. So I can't imagine what it would have been like for a woman.
Well, a bit of a shock to the system, but so then they sent me, my first location was in the North Sea, and I guess it was like a bit too much, in terms of language, because my English was a lot worse then, so understanding the Scottish accent was a challenge. Arriving in winter time was also another challenge. I come from rural Venezuela where it's all the time hot and hotter. So it was a shock to the system. And so I asked for a transfer because I couldn't really cope very well with it. And then they put me into this international rota, which then they sent me straight, I remember, from Aberdeen straight to Indonesia, going to Balikpapan. So that was my introduction to the, international rota. And after that, I never stayed at a fixed location. It was on a job by job basis. And it was just going from one place to another one. So I got to see really one of the reasons I wanted to join somebody, or what was calling me to join them, was this adventure. I've been able to travel and to see the world and to meet different people. So it was, I got all of that. Yes, going from the most fascinating places, I think, still is like crossing China by road,
Wow.
going to the border with Mongolia. That was something I can never take away. Being working in Africa, several places. Congo at that time was very, very tough. Of course, working offshore, working in Latin America. I spent a bit of time down in Argentina, working on the Tierra del Fuego, so that was also nice. Up in Alaska, doing fracking jobs, doing some fracking around Permian. So it was
Yeah, I was.
a bit of
Oh wow.
everywhere. Yeah.
How was Russia?
So that, yeah. I was good. I was around the area of Perm. So different, I would say. But you get to learn pretty early to accept the differences. That it's not any place or anything is better or worse. It's just different. So you learn really quick to digest that, and becomes part of you. Is that acceptance of different ways of working. Like you just accept things a bit easier. So I think that was very important for me, to have that indoctrination quite earlier on in my career, because it takes away this judgment part of somebody's doing better or worse than somebody else. So yeah, it did help me, and it did shape a lot of
No,
I
can only imagine. So obviously being from Venezuela, very oil rich, so I take it was quite easy to know that you wanted to go into that industry, was it? No?
Not that easy, because right,
Yeah.
being a female, like I come from a farm, and within the farm there were 6 gas wells, and every time somebody, like services were going into those wells, it was like,
Okay.
wasn't allowed to be closer to it, mainly because they would leave the gates open, and the cows will leave the pad and stuff like that. So, and it wasn't like an industry or something I could relate to. I was a bit more detached from that. Comment, I think that the expectation was, for girls, rural Venezuela to be in that time was more to be, the highest that you could aspire to be was to be a teacher, something like that. I started at the Catholic schools, and I got in trouble when I was asked to what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was following this
Yeah.
Challenger story, about this space. And for me, it was great because it meant that a teacher could go to space. And because I was seeing that like my goal, just to become a teacher or something like that, and being able to go to space, it was like, wow. So I had that idea of saying, well, what I want to do, I want to go to space. And I got detained, asked for my parents to come to take these ideas away from that girl, because that is no.
To wash away
So
your sins.
that's very, very different. Yeah, of course. Of course, that, it doesn't reflect, as a general, religious view, but it was very much very rural. And it was from that place. And yeah, but I guess I always wanted to be an engineer. I was fascinated by engines, how they work. I learned to drive in a tractor, so knowing how it works and what happens when you shift gears, and that kind of, I was always drawn into it, even though girls have to stay behind and watch, do were not actively. So for me, it was a means of, yeah, I will get to do this. So it was a no-brainer, I guess, for me to go into engineering.
So after Slum, what happened next? Where did you go?
I had a
Oh, wow.
scholarship from the Venezuelan government to do a master's and PhD then. So so I had up to 5 years to take that scholarship. So that's why I knew I was going to work just for 5 years, and that's what I did. Yeah, so that's why I was also keen on accelerating what I was doing. I didn't complain of not having days off or holidays during these 5 years because I knew it was only 5 years. So, so I just went to Heriwat. So I joined Heriwat and did a master's there, and then at that time, I traded the PhD for an MBA. I felt it was more suitable because I thought about leaving the oil industry at that time. Perhaps it was for living in Edinburgh where you have a different vibe to the, it's like oil and gas focus. So it was more into financing and stuff. So I was gearing a bit away from the engineering side, but I got that was a time where the major operators were joining, like IKEA, Arco, Total, Fina Elf, and all those times, ExxonMobil. So I was drawn into, I'm quite interested into a management of change, how cultures of a company, who takes over what. It could be that one company take over another one, but that doesn't mean that culturally will do it. There is a dominant culture. So I was very interested on that, and of course I stayed within oil and gas, and then I started working as a consultant. Yeah, so I did a bit of drilling, completions.
So I take it you've worked for quite a few majors then and stuff, have you? And that, yeah, right. Yeah. Sorry. No, you go. Sorry.
Sorry. No, that was one of the things that perhaps that the MBA gave me. It was like that ownership of, you are in charge of your career, of your development. And it was a bit of a combination of, being a consultant, and you also have a freedom to work on a project by project basis. So I remember in that time, things like horizontal wells, multilaterals, intelligent wells, heavy oil, HPHT. So these kind of things, I just wanted to have or to build like portfolio of skills. So I started selecting projects, what I wanted to do based on that. So, and that's how, and then of course you have to change operators as well from one to the other one. So I work for all the major operators, but it was a bit on purpose, for me to build that.
So obviously you got in touch with us on LinkedIn. The one thing that stood out for me is I'm not sure. I take it's obviously a side project you're working on, or you were working on, but you looked into ways of repurposing offshore infrastructure for hydrogen and carbon storage. Is that a side working, or was that a thesis, or how did that come about?
Well, that comes as a consequence of few things, especially when I work for Shell in the Netherlands, where you had to, so I was a wells engineering manager there, and I was exposed to the need to have or to operationalize the energy transition. It was very much in the front end of accelerating the close down of the Groningen field, and and what it meant. So it was for first time that I started looking into what does it mean to do that transition. And working from oil and gas, it was like, you do realize it's not like a switch that you just, from 1st of December or 1st of January, now everybody goes into green. So it was like my first exposure to this takes a lot of planning. This takes a lot of effort. And because everybody wants a hot water, everybody wants a kettle to work whenever they want to. And So, and having been exposed to the large number of, it's not just wells, but it's the full infrastructure that it has been built around oil and gas, that changing that from one day to another one wasn't going to be a walk in the park. And so I was also drawn by that idea of what did you do with it? What did you do with that material? What did you do with these wells? It's a lot of pipelines. So is it any reason why we can repurpose it? And that is when it started to come, as to, because I knew working for so long into oil and gas that you always leave a safety margin, your engineering factors, and if you over-engineer, and sometimes you were allowed to do a bit more like gold-plated type of in terms of materials. So there is some remaining life there. So there is a space, and I always knew that there was a space technically to do this repurposing. And I also thought about who will best help to identify if there is a remaining life there. It's very difficult as an external, somebody like from another energy sector coming into oil and gas and try to assess what we have been doing. I think it takes a lot longer, to get it. But if you are inside, I think if that changed from the inside, then we knew what are the weakest spots, because we know very well in terms of integrity what's the remaining life. So it does. So I thought, well, it will make sense that we start looking into this one.
I think, but one of the questions I'm thinking of now is the reality of this, excuse me, this net zero and let's say the green energy. Where are we really realistically? Where are we going with it?
Well, there is, undoubtedly there is a need for shift and change, and it's not just looking from the point of view of the environment and the whole reasoning on climate change. I don't deny that. But there is also a bigger shift into the whole societal dynamics as well. So it's all occurring at the same time. So there is a need to do that shift, because the energy requirement that we will continue to have is going to increase. Nothing, if everybody starts to use their chat or GPT or using AI, that energy requirement is a lot higher. And I think, there has been a lot of comments and studies trying to calculate how much more energy we're going to need if we start shifting that. So at the same time, this issue or having the energy trilemma, having secure source of energy, making sure it's sustainable and making sure it's accessible. So it has to be like a combination. And I'm noting there, and many times criticized for not taking sides, because if I work in oil and gas, how come I will be thinking about green energy? Or, it's either, or most people expect that you take either side, because it's very binary. You are either in or out. But what I have learned is that there is a way where there is a hybrid solution, where there is something that we could really work alongside. And I look into the company's strategies, like the BP going all the way green and coming back now from that, or backing from that. And we see the other more into the Americans ones staying with oil and gas, and they are good there. And then it's like, so who is taking care of what? So I'm very much into the hybrid space where there is clearly room for becoming greener, but there is also that need to maintain security. So I will see from on the life, on timeline vision.
Yeah,
it,
I'm
it will remain
totally the same.
both of them.
I think we need both, but I think it's got to be done in a hybrid way, like you say, where you can't just switch one off and then expect the other one to start up and cover what's been covering. I mean, if you look at how dependent we've been on oil and gas, to think you can stick a few windmills in the sea or on a couple of hills and think there's going to take over, I think there is a sense of naivety. Unfortunately, a lot of that comes from our government at the moment. But carbon storage, what's your views on that though? Is that how is that going to go?
Yeah, there is room for that. So, we took plenty out, so we could put it in again. So, yes, there is a lot more that can be done there. What better tank than the reservoirs itself? So we have proven already that you could retrieve hydrocarbons from there. So that it could store. So you could technically, it is feasible to go and put them back in. So of course I do believe on that.
Yeah.
It is proven it can be done. However, it's the whole narrative of it. It's this disconnect between what needs to be done and how is that we're going to get it done and what is needed to get it done. Yeah. So the whole infrastructure has to be able to capture it, to be able to transport it, to be able to store it. And then what are we going to do with that? What is the whole licensing scheme? What's the regulatory side of it? Who is responsible for what? Where is the profit going to come from? Because that is something that is going to be stored, not to be retrieved again. So where is that value? Because on hydrocarbons, we see the value because we produce and we do something with it and sell it and transform it. And there are several usages for it. But going the other way, where you apply your technology to capture it, transport it, and then you store it. Where is the payment for that? And who is making the profit of that? Because and for how long is long? So it's just that those principles of economics, unfortunately, doesn't work in that way. In that direction. So we have to rethink about how that development of carbon markets, where is it going? Because at the moment it's all seen as a penalty, all those who is emitting. So you have to be responsible for storing it, for capturing and storing it. But it has to be something else.
I mean, you're not doing it off the good of your own back, are you? If you're a company, ultimately, you've got to be making something off the back of it. Is there any country whose model you think is probably going the right direction?
I think one of the things that have changed a lot is the commonality of the goal. And I like, of course, that approach of the EU that is taking towards, this net zero. However, it has also proven that it's not enough that small sectors of the world does it. Well, the vast majority doesn't, so it doesn't really help with the narrative of it. So, and even with the efforts from the United Nations, there is still no quite there. And it's because it's not that straightforward. It goes around this concept of a polluter pays principle. So if I didn't do it, why do I have to pay for it? Who received the benefit of the industrialization, which actually resulted on those higher levels. So, and that is not an easy topic to discuss. because those were decisions and things that were made in the past, but it's the people today who has to deal with it, who have to pay for it. And it all goes along the same narrative, and perhaps the false narrative that has been created around the renewables. Just because it's natural or it's free doesn't mean it's cheap. And there is this belief on people that green energy is cheaper because it comes from nature. And that, I think, we have failed to have the right narrative and to say people, well, it takes a lot of investment to do that. Somebody has to pay for that. And the fact that we want to have electricity when we want, or we want to have sources of heat when we want to, that optionality also has a price to pay, and we have to pay for that. So, in terms of which countries of which areas are doing best, that is, I don't think there is a race that anybody will be proud of winning it, per se. There is when you hear all the politicians talking, they are very proud and, yes, we are pushing forward with this agenda. But it's a very, what does it take for the government to achieve all their objectives and arrive to the top of the mountain?
Yeah.
But they are there
That's
alone.
well put, actually.
Nobody has followed with them. So it's a very lonely goal to have. But there are really good initiatives, in terms of proving technology, making it feasible. We have excellent examples around, and I like the examples of Europe. What it has. I'm also following closely into Asia, what China has been doing in terms of guaranteeing the longevity of the green agenda. I even thought, for all the reasons that I will not discuss, and they're seeing that off on them, but but there are good things. It's just pockets of innovation happening. There is a lot of initiatives to promote that. What we are all lacking is how cohesive all the efforts are, and that is very difficult because it calls into what are the main drivers of each country, and even within a country that we can see here in the UK. The government are pushing strong policies, energy policies, but they look around and who is following them. It's like there is a gap that it has to be acknowledged, which is the consequence of pushing such harsh energy policies that is leaving areas of devastation around. And even if we were to reach that point, just look at what happened in Spain. It's really a good reflection as to, regardless of the reason why the blackout happened, it could happen. It could happen to us. What is that? What is the level of readiness? What is that we are going to do for that? Because it could be prolonged blackouts. So how are we going to cope? Because everybody will be looking back at the government. They're not going to look into the energy providers. It's like, what have you been doing? And it's the whole economy as well. So because they don't act alone or independently, and we are all related. So it's very complex. So the whole energy scenario is complex, and in my view, it needs a higher level, and I mean higher, a more honest view and more transparent way, or being able to use that to reflect and to see what the other ones are doing, what is the cost, what's the consequence of accelerating certain agenda versus just thinking more on the consequence of that and calling out the people and work more together, more than us and them. So
really well put, actually. I think everyone loves to bash the oil and gas industry, for example, but when push comes to shove and all the lights go out, there's probably one resource that at least you can guarantee on to keep them back on. A PhD. What's the most surprising findings you found during your studies?
How relatively easy the technical solution is. Maybe because we come from a world of, we have drilled very deep water. We have developed technology pretty fast. If you look into the oil and gas, it's relative, we came from land to offshore, the shallow waters started to go deeper water. So all that framework as to how to develop technology, I think that we got pretty good at it. A better understanding of materials, how to maintain integrity. So, and good tools to understand what is happening in the reservoirs, what is happening down there. So all these lessons is like a path that we have already paved. So we could just go and apply. It's more like an application of it. Now, I'm not saying that every infrastructure is okay to repurpose, but what I'm saying is on the assessment of it is relatively more straightforward. Now, the second surprising part was how obvious the disconnect between the regulatory framework, the commercial opportunities with the technical. Everybody goes, a lot of effort has been into to assess technical and economic assessments of doing things to accelerate that green agenda. But it's quite obvious how detached that idea or that goal is with the actual plans. And I'm surprised that it is so obvious, but at the same time, we're not talking enough about it. So that disconnect, it really strikes me. And it all goes into who is managing that narrative. We are full with the, every week we read good news of the progress into the green agenda. But at the same time, we also see how far we're getting from that goal as well. And when you look into why is that, I think we go back again into that thought. It has to be single-sided. It has to be a quick jump from oil and gas into green. We haven't spent enough time to manage it together. And that is also surprising. It has
I did a podcast yesterday as well, actually, and I'm baffled because I don't understand why where all the money's coming from, and two, why the government at the moment is so hellbound on literally, decimating one industry in hope of another. To the point where obviously now we've become incredibly reliant on imports from gas, for example. I know Norway's having a field day off us at the moment, and I don't understand where they think the winning, like how you win on the back of this, because even the infrastructure for some of the wind farms that come in, it's not there yet. They're ploughing on with building them, farms left, right, and centre. And we still have issues when I think last year we spent something like £1 billion turning wind farms off. And it's almost as the writing's on the wall for the way that we're going, but it's totally wrong. Obviously, energy majors are not enjoying this one bit. Harbour Energy is getting absolutely rinsed. Smaller energy majors, so to speak, and it's not just economic suicide, but it's energy suicide in the way that we're going with the oil and gas. And there's so many people out there that obviously, someone like yourself and the person I spoke to the other day who are saying this, but there's no intention of listening to it. They're hellbound on this net zero, green industry. Yeah, and I just don't understand who benefits from it all at the end of it.
That's a good question. I may now find out what the answer to that one is. But because I do question that, of course, when you see, the protest and people celebrating that certain field doesn't get to go ahead. Yeah, I do worried about that because it's the same people that wants to go back home, and when they press the bottom of the kettle, they want the water boiling and they want their tea. Even the clothing that they are wearing, everything they are wearing is so coming from oil and gas. So rightly or wrong, but that is how we have built. So it's not about looking back and criticizing because if things are done, that's the way how we as a society has developed. It's about acknowledging that and looking a way forward. And I think it all goes into the quality of the narrative. And it's my very personal view, but I think it all goes related to the level of education and how you bring people alongside with you to be open and to discuss what the real problems are. And we go into, in order to have a meaningful discussion with the society and be open, the people need to be able to also understand, the principles of economics, the principles of, how does it take, how does the milk get into the fridge, to have that realization of what happens outside the boundaries of my room, and how the rest functions. So if a society doesn't have that, then it's very difficult to articulate and creates the perfect ground for populists or, people with a different agenda coming to power, into government, and dictate what the energy policies are going to be. And so that's when the politics, without the right level of integrity or long-term view, or really sound interest, that comes into play. And it's not an easy answer, to say or to explain why that is happening. Can we ever stop that from happening? I don't think so, because that's the nature of the politics. They just want to be elected, so you just have to say what the people wants to hear. So that tells you that I'm pretty sure if we are honest and we start publishing, like for example, January, capacity Scotland pay was about 380 million pounds to the wind farm operators just in 1 month. So it is significant, and you don't see those ones in the news, but you don't see the people talking about that. So it's like mask, and so until we have full or a bit more transparency as to what is happening, then it's going to become very difficult. And that's what I mean with talking about the consequence. I think making a decision of writing an energy policy is not that hard. It's talking about the consequence of that. It's not trying to look into what will happen if we implement this, running this outlook and these scenarios. And that's, they do have that ability. So I think it's a more profound, it will need the people.
Yeah, education isn't ultimately. Unfortunately, it's very easy to convince the masses with certain media streams these days. I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit because I found it quite difficult to get women on. Maybe I need to try harder, or maybe I need to approach it better. But thankfully, you came to me, which was a lot easier. But being a woman in the energy sector, how did you find it? How did you cope? Yeah. Okay. Just because it's so male dominated, especially in the field. I think it's more the field than anything. I mean,
well, it's what I have at the beginning, I must admit, and for quite some long time, I thought, and maybe because of that introduction into the oil and gas, and I thought, very male dominated and very, the coveralls still has the zip going up, and it's like, why do I need that? And it's the whole yes, is a man type, because it's a very rough environment, and there is no doubt of that. It's very difficult, and as you have discussed in some of your podcasts, it's very hard to go away and to come back to a family. Imagine how
Yeah,
hard
I
it
know.
was for the mom, which is like the center of it. Are dependent, and you have to go away and come back. How do you switch on and off? And there is an emotional, there is a quite a wider impact, more than I would like to recognize, from a woman point of view. However, what I have found out is that I was used to believe that the whole, I was very pro diversity and inclusion. It's like, yes, we should have equal opportunities and so forth. But when I started looking and wondering, have I stopped any opportunities because I'm a girl? I don't think I can say yes, because I haven't received more or less opportunities for being a woman. Where the challenges have been is when the people I'm working with, or that sphere, they have to be open to different ways of thinking. That perhaps it's not you who holds that absolute answer. Especially technically, that doesn't have to be your answer, the correct one. Accepting that there are other points of view, there are things that you are blind to, and that is, for me, is the real definition of inclusion and inclusivity. It's nothing to do if you are male or female. If you are able to articulate your ideas properly, and you could persuade and you could illustrate what is that you want to do. And at the same time, we also have to be prepared to accept, well, what I thought was not entirely right, or I heard something that is a better way of doing it. And it could be from somebody I didn't expect. It could be male or female, or whatever color it is, or where it's coming from. And so I think it's more being humble enough to accept things are, you are not right all the time. And I can't say it will be unfair for me to say just for being female. I think at the beginning of my career, yes, because it was very rough, and working in the field. Of course, there is no male and female. It was everybody into the same. But yes, throughout, I think today has changed a lot. But it's more about accepting that other ones are equally.
Yeah. No, that's a good way. I think egos is quite big. It's funny. So one of my mates is a football player actually, and he said egos is the biggest problem for footballers, being able to accept that they're doing something wrong and whatnot. And I think that kind of can go to people in the industry, but maybe the ones that are more experienced. If someone, if you get this younger person in who's potentially a clever girl or boy, let's say, and finding it hard to turn around, after 25 years of saying, well, we've done it this way, and they've come out and said, yeah, we've worked out that this is a better way to do it. I'd imagine that's a lot more difficult to get across. Whether you, like you say, whether you're a male or female, it doesn't really matter on that front. I think egos, but I think you're always going to get egos in that industry, especially from shall we say, the more veterans in it. Yeah.
Yes, it's hard to let go. It's hard to. It comes with that pride and justification why I have been for all these years. But I look into that. It's more like I like this, and I try to be under this principle, and I call it my golden principle, because I try to be conscious of it. And it's the 2 ears and 1 mouth. So you always have to hear twice what they say. Very easy to say, very difficult to practice, because what it means is you have to all the time be open to say there are different ways of doing it. So detaching the better or worse is just different. And why don't we go and do it and then prove ourselves that it was right or wrong, or something was better? Because everything goes under context. You take decisions on a constantly. And it's not about tagging every time a right or wrong decision. It's about at the time that you decide something, that was the best that you could come up with. Later on, you could prove that perhaps you could have taken another direction. You could have done something different, but at the time, that was the best. And these are the consequences of that. And not dwell in the past. And then it's like, okay, what is that I should have learned? What is that, that I could now apply in order to begin? And that doesn't have to be all coming from ourselves, and that is where we act, and professionally, how to interact with other people. There is a lot of people that has done very differently. And so being able to listen to that and be able to act for that and having proper discussions as to tell me more about your idea. But you're right, ego is always on the
There's nothing worse than being told that you're doing something wrong and they've told you it the right way and you go and do it and you find out it is the right way, because coming back's not easy to explain. All right, sorry, I got that wrong. What advice would you give to someone starting out now?
The best time, this cliche, the best time is now. I've been doing or participating in promotions, going to universities and, trying to look for there's STEM and women in STEM, trying to bring them into engineering. And I have been quite sadly shocked to see the level and the number of students in engineering going down and dropping. So that is alarm bells for me, because I come from the idea that everybody needs to be an engineer. You don't need to go through university. Not everybody, because they are different in path. But there is something alongside the innovation and the speed of innovation that we need to have, that it does require to have a healthy number of engineers. And seeing a decline on that, it worries me, because it's a consequence of the narrative what we have been using. If you ask a young engineer, studying at these universities, would you consider going into oil and gas? And they are like, no, that is not well seen. And that is worrying for many reasons. And my message to the younger are follow the path that you like. Of course, I'm not trying to force people into engineering or to come into energy, but there is plenty to do, and this shift away from sciences and going into other areas are perhaps a consequence of the narrative. And that is where we have to be a little more responsible, because the people today holding positions within like the energy sector are pretty much responsible for what we say outside. Also brings more weighting to walk your talk. You're saying you're doing something, do it. What you do and not do as you say. And my advice will be to just be more inquisitive, go more into the why, and then worry less on the how, but that's a bit later, but go into the why you're doing things. And don't take things that you made for granted or follow the social media.
Look at it from two sides. I think that's what I've started doing now. I think you've got your main mainstream media, and then there's always another side to the story. That's what I've started doing is instead of just taking the headlines from one thing, take the headlines from multiple, and then you can kind of put it together yourself.
There is something really good about stories and having the time, like the stories that you have put out in the podcast, they are so different. And at the same time, it's like there is a common narrative to it, because you do feel identified with few of them. And it's like, it's always good when you hear it or read it that has happened to somebody else. It's like,
I think that's one of the things I wanted to kind of do actually with the podcast, is people can start identifying to it, because it's I've said this, I don't know how many times I keep saying it, but this industry is so important to absolutely every person, and it has more impact on them from a day-to-day basis than any TikTok influencer or any, whatever else we're doing now, on TikTok nowadays, which is a very easy way of becoming an influencer. But TikTok probably wouldn't even be there if the energy industry wasn't behind it. And yeah, I think unfortunately there's a lot more stories going on behind the scenes to starting up your car and going to work and doing whatever you do to the day job than just going to the petrol pump and putting the petrol in your car and yeah, I'd like to, as the plan is to pull the curtain back more and get more people on and get more people understanding that oil and gas shouldn't be as demonized as it is. Don't get me wrong, it needs change in our approach, and it needs to evolve like most things do. But to demonize it in the way that this government is at the moment, I think it's ridiculous, and it's not just that. These people that are reading into it, unfortunately, they'll suffer from it in the long run because the economic suicide on the back end of it is eventually going to affect them directly. Which then, yeah,
Directly.
unfortunately, then it's a little bit too late because we've closed down more fields, more majors have left, and we're importing nearly everything. I have a question to ask everyone. I need to actually change it because I think people say the same answer every time. And I'm going to work on that. But if you had your time again and you knew now, would you still go down the same path? Yeah.
I would say definitely yes, because I'm one of
Yeah.
the people that owns what you have done. So I have responsibility. I'm 100% responsible for every mistake I made. So yes. However, there is that room as well as to, will I do any part of that a bit different? I think I would have liked to shorten the learning curves. Sometimes you have to, a mistake, you have to do it more than once. And I know a lot of people don't like to say that, but there is stubborn inside. Let's try again. Maybe because I didn't do this. But yes, I will do it. I will like to shorten some of those. But yes, on this, I've been trained those 33 years.
Yeah, I thought that'd be the answer. To be honest, everyone gives the same. I think only one person said no, and I think I'm gonna have to reword that last question. To be honest.
Well, it will be. I think, it will be against our human nature, to say you would like to change something that you cannot control, basically. So yes, so I would like to put it more, because sometimes these kind of questions I put them through, like, what happens to your child, when if you were to have a listening child, one of those ones that pay attention really well, is kind of like a teenager at a listen, and where to walk alongside, what will be the things that you will guide, because that is based on your own experience, the things that has no brought you any value, and it's your person that you love the most as your own child. So if you were to guide that and to say, will you tell your child to do exactly as you did?
Because, same. I'm thinking about that now as you say it.
I wouldn't
no.
any of my to do.
Yeah.
I could do it again, but I wouldn't like them to do it because it was painful. It was painful, and there are things that there are better ways of doing it, and I would like to tell them about that instead of, but it's a different angle, because if you ask that for each person, of course I will walk it exactly the same, but just me.
Yeah, that's probably the best answer I've had, actually. Yeah, just myself, no one else. Yeah, no, I like that, actually.
No one else, yes. No one else I do love.
Stick
Maybe
them in.
people I don't like too much, yes. Come along.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yo, thanks so much for coming on, Nayrim.
Yeah.
Another week, another podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to ask one favor, and you're going to get it every week from now on. if you are enjoying the show, then please would you do me a massive favor to help it. Like, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're on. It really does help me a lot to see that people actually are liking it. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. You can comment. I'll probably ignore it anyway. Until then, take care, and we go again.